Welcome to the LA Sentinel Weekly Election Edition. I'm Nielle, digital editor for the Los Angeles Sentinel newspaper. 2020 is a critical year for African Americans as it relates to the census and the election. And since our primary is coming up on Tuesday, March 3rd, we thought it was important to share with you a couple of important things. Number one, polling places are out and voting centers are in. So to find the nearest voting center closest to you, you can visit lavote.net or you can visit us at lasentinel.net. And did you know that you can vote today, right now? You don't have to wait till Tuesday? That's right. They've made it more convenient for you to be able to vote. So once again, to find out the nearest voting center closest to you, visit lasentinel.net. And you can even register. So if you need to change your address or you've never been a registered voter, you can register today and you can vote today. So things are changing and we thought it was very important for you to know. Another thing is, if you are concerned about who some of the candidates are, or if you don't know who some of the judges are, the LA Sentinel and Bakewell Media put together a slate for you. So if you need some help or if you need a cheat sheet, pick up a copy of the LA Sentinel today. And you could take this into the ballot box with you and use it as a guide to know who we feel would be helpful to our community. So to find the nearest voting center, visit lavote.net or check us out at lasentinel.net. She's the co-founder of Black Lives Matter, and she's the reason why Measure R is on the LA County ballot. Welcome, Patrisse Cullors.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
No, it's such a pleasure to have you finally here at the LA Sentinel. So before we get into Measure R, I want to talk about Black Lives Matter.
Sure.
It started as a hashtag, and then what happened?
It started as a hashtag in 2013, and then the three women who started it wanted to organize other people across the country and across the world. We got a lot of feedback from other Black people that they wanted to use Black Lives Matter. We started an organization called the Black Lives Matter Global Network, and that organization still exists, and there are multiple chapters that are doing amazing work across the country and across the world.
Wow. So, I mean, who came up with the hashtag? I mean, where did it start? What invoked such this strong response?
Alicia Garza came up with the phrase Black Lives Matter, and then I came up with the hashtag. I put a hashtag in front of the phrase. And then Opal Tometi joined us just a few days later to help build out the communications infrastructure of the organization.
So Black Lives Matter started from pain, right? From rage. Would you say that?
I think it started from love. I think it was, being so disappointed in how Black people were treated and loving us so much that we wanted to do something that could express our love. Black Lives Matter is a love letter to the movement. It's something that really grounds, Black people in our fight for each other. So yes, pain, but also I would say mostly love.
I love that.
Thank you.
Really do. And so you start Black Lives Matter, you guys start making change, and then you decide to create a ballot measure?
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't that linear. I grew up in Los Angeles. I'm born and raised here, and I grew up in the 80s and the 90s when over-policing and militarized policing was at its finest. I grew up witnessing my family members being abused by law enforcement, being sent to the Los Angeles County jail system, and my brother, who is a big influence of mine, was diagnosed with schizophrenia when he was in Twin Towers when he was 19. And unfortunately, he was bruised and battered by the LA Sheriff's Department. So that was when I was 16 years old, and that put a fire in my belly. It wouldn't be until I was 28 years old, 10 years later, that I started a local organization called Dignity and Power Now. And that was a year before Black Lives Matter. So we were taking on the Sheriff's Department. We were also taking on the jail fight and trying to make sure that LA County wasn't going to spend $3.5 billion on 2 new jails. So that fight, started almost a decade plus ago.
Wow.
And I think what I've done throughout the last 10 years is, as Black Lives Matter has developed, I've always stayed grounded in Los Angeles. And honestly, when 45 was elected into office in 2016, I made a choice to come back home and be more present because I was obviously doing a lot of national work with Black Lives Matter. I wanted to be more present, and so I started alongside a few other organizations, Justice LA.
Okay.
And Justice LA is a grassroots coalition that really was the first sort of engine in fighting the jail fight and stopping the jail plan. But then, right after I started Justice LA, I started Reform LA Jails, a ballot committee. And I'm the chair of Reform LA Jails. Jasmine Canick, who played a critical role in supporting us getting those 250,000 signatures. Her and I spent the first year really making sure we got those signatures together, building a coalition, raising the money. It's a lot of money to change the law, y'all. Like, I did not know that, did not realize that. And from there, we've spent the last year, gearing up to win on Tuesday, March 3rd.
I mean, I want to go back to what you said about love. And I think a lot of people like to get involved, but the passion starts at home.
Absolutely.
And then it goes into your community,
Absolutely.
then it goes into your city, state, and nation. So for those of you who really want to get involved, start at home, right?
Absolutely. That's so critical. Like, local politics are so important. I just wrote an article that was talking about Selma, Alabama, and the role that Selma, Alabama played in the Voting Rights Act. And I believe that Los Angeles is ground zero for criminal justice reform, and the way that Selma was ground zero for voting rights and ending voter suppression and repression of the Black community. And so what we do in our neighborhoods matters, not just for the neighborhood, but for the rest of the country.
Because they're watching.
Absolutely. And because when one neighborhood changes, we set the precedent for other neighborhoods to change.
So let's talk about the process. So you decide that you want to create a ballot measure, right?
Yes.
So what's the process? Do you have to file something?
So the first thing you need to do is collect signatures.
Okay.
And it's based off of the last election and a percentage. Whoever came out to vote the last election, a percentage of those numbers, you have to then collect from Los Angeles voters who are valid voters, registered and valid.
So those are the people standing at the grocery stores and
Precisely,
outside.
which I have a whole nother love for.
Right.
I, have so much love for that job, to go and be the person who has to convince someone to sign something. Because it has to be paper. You cannot do it online. Has to be a wet signature. You collect enough signatures, and you have to do it in a certain amount of time. You can't like wait, a month before the election. You have to submit in a certain amount of time. So once you collect those signatures, then you submit here to the county clerk's office. And from there, after the county clerk submission, then you wait because the county clerk has to verify every single signature to make sure they are valid signatures. If you get enough signatures, then if you get enough valid signatures, then you go on to be in the next election.
And so you guys had to get like 140,000 signatures, and you exceeded that, right?
We did. Yeah, we got 247,000 signatures.
Wow, the passion.
Exactly. And from there, we waited to see if we were going to be verified.
So let's talk about Measure R, Reform LA Jails. What is it? What is the policy that you want to change, particularly?
So Measure R is two things. Number one, it's going to help root out corruption inside of the Sheriff's Department. It's going to help stop abuse that's happening at the hands of the Sheriff's Department by empowering the current civilian oversight body to have subpoena power and other investigative powers so that they can do an effective job in stopping our Sheriff's Department from doing the harm that they've done in our communities. That's number one. Number two, this measure is going to make the Civilian Oversight Commission create a feasibility plan that will help figure out how do we decarcerate our jails from people who are mentally ill, drug dependent, chronically homeless, and get them the services that they need.
Okay, so what are, in your mind, alternatives to incarceration?
Well, number one, we need to be able to give people treatment. So people with severe mental illness shouldn't be kept in psyche Rs or in Twin Towers. They need to get intervention and support. And so community-based services such as mental health services, I think, are critical. We don't have enough beds in Los Angeles outside of the jail bed. That jail bed is king in Los Angeles. We need to minimize the jail bed, and we need to actually really produce an infrastructure in Los Angeles where people, if they have a mental health crisis, they can go somewhere that isn't jail. Okay. That they could be supported by professionals, and that they could be connected with their families. When we remove people with severe mental illness, when we remove anybody from their family, it's depressing. But when we remove people with severe mental illness from their families, it exacerbates the issue. So we need to do that. We need affordable housing in Los Angeles.
Definitely.
People need to be able to have housing. And I argue that if you can't afford housing, you still need to have housing. We are in a public health crisis with the amount of homelessness. In the old neighborhood that I grew up in, there's a full-on homeless camp. Okay. And that didn't exist. That didn't exist 20 years ago.
I know, when you drive around the city now, it's everywhere.
Because everybody's being pushed out of their homes. And there's a myth that homeless people don't have jobs. That's so untrue. There are people who have part-time, full-time jobs who are living in their cars.
They're campers. Like, now you go into some communities and there are campers lined up all down the street, and it's like, when did this happen?
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. It's a wealth gap, and we're seeing it over and over again. And so this conversation with the Board of Supervisors, the audience should know that we did successfully stop those $3.5 billion jails from being built. Justice LA, thank you. Justice LA and Reform LA jails were at the forefront of getting those stopped, and through getting those stopped, now we have an opportunity. The Alternatives to Incarceration Working Group that came out of the challenging of these two jails, they developed an actual report called Care First, Jails Last. And so that report is an amazing report that really documents the work that's happened over 10 years. And they took it a step further to look at the landscape and how the landscape in Los Angeles has to change. If we don't build infrastructure in LA that really addresses homelessness, severe mental illness, and drug dependency, we are going to live in an LA where most people are homeless.
And it will get dangerous.
Absolutely.
Because people get desperate.
Absolutely.
And then it becomes your problem because now you're fearful.
Absolutely.
Now, one of the things that you have done, because I come from a political background, I've run campaigns, you are mixing art and activism. And it's not traditional. And some people on the outside were looking like, well, what is going on with this? But you have taken art, you've mixed it with activism, and you are about to pass your ballot measure. How important, or why did you decide to infuse the two, or was it natural for you?
It's a great question. I have always been an artist. I was an artist before I was an organizer. I was an artist before I was politicized. And
you like that politicized.
Yeah, and once I became politicized, it made me politicize my artwork and my art practice. I'm a trained dancer, so I grew up dancing, and then I transitioned into doing performance art, and now I do, performance art, public art, large-scale installations, and I really believe that art and culture is incredibly important when we're trying to change politics, because you're going to get the few people that understand the policy and the politics of it all, but honestly, everybody can understand art. Yeah. Everybody can understand the impact. You feel art differently than a policy measure. And so it's important for me, it has been important for me to make sure that every project that I'm a part of has a deep art focus.
Okay. And so how do you go about deciding who's going to be on your team?
I usually just call out on artists.
Really?
Yeah, from the very beginning. Dignity and Power Now had an art crew called Freedom Harvest. Justice LA had an art crew that implemented a jail bed drop where they got 100 jail beds. They built 100 jail beds. And the Reform LA Jails has a crew of artists. We have an art and cultural coordinator and director of Reform LA Jails, Damon Turner from Trap Heels, and you went to his greenhouse.
Yeah, that was really dope.
Yeah, so I believe in bringing in the artists and culture workers from the beginning to help us develop the strategy. I don't like when groups bring the artists in afterwards. You do the graphic, or you do the poem. No, the artist should be in from the very beginning.
Okay. So art activism, and now we're talking about Black Lives Matter, civil rights. Do you feel like Black Lives Matter has taken the baton in carrying for what the civil rights movement? Do you think it's the civil rights movement of today?
I think we are one of the most impactful movements of this generation, yes. And I say that very humbly, but we changed the world, we changed the conversation about anti-Blackness, and we allowed for amazing organizations, not just Black Lives Matter Global Network, but other organizations to develop and build. We sort of set the foundation for why there should be more Black organizing.
So after Tuesday.
What happens?
Yeah, what happens?
We implement the law. So much of what happens when a law is passed is implementation. You know, think about Brown v. Board. You know, think about Roe v. Wade. You know, there's so many laws that get passed, and then we think the hard work was passing it. That's not the hard work. The hard work is implementing it, because how do you implement something in a culture that has historically not wanted you to be a part of it? And I think that's what our work and role is going to be. You know, March 3rd we win, March 4th we sit with the Civilian Oversight Commission to really sit them down and say, this is your task, and we want to help and support you.
Okay, so we're talking about Measure R. The Los Angeles Sentinel has endorsed Measure R.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So when you go to the polls, which you can go now.
Yes, the polls are open.
They're open. There are no more polling places. They're now called voting centers.
Yes.
And they've made it more convenient for you to go. So visit lavote.net, or you can visit the lasentinel.net to find out more about where the voting center is closest to you. Now, we're coming out of Black History Month, going into Women's History Month. Tell us about some of your heroes and sheroes.
Oh, I have so many. Harriet Tubman's my number one.
Why?
Because she was courageous and brave, and all odds were against her, and she prevailed, and she stayed grounded in spirit, and I think I feel really connected to her around that. Malcolm X, Dr. Martin Luther King, Ella Baker, Fannie Lou Hamer, Rigoberto Menchú, some contemporary leaders, Charlene Carruthers from BYP 100, the former national director of BYP 100, Alicia Garza and Opal Tometi, obviously, Mervyn Mercano, who actually lives around the corner from here. He's a comm strategist, and in so many ways was the person who built the foundation for a lot of the communications and strategy, political strategy in Ferguson. And you know, I have like a bunch of folks in entertainment that I really look up to. Ava DuVernay. There's folks like, you know, Lena Waithe, that are really charting a new path forward. Fine artist Lauren Halsey, who is from South Central. All her work is, you know, for South Central. She is a heartbeat of mine. Erin Zuli, who is actually one of the curators at the Hammer Museum, Black woman. So across the board, I feel like from politics to art and culture, there are so many people who I feel drawn to and look up to. Jasmine Canick, I see her as a political mentor of mine, who, you know, she sort of like was like, all right, girl, this is how this works. I had never done a ballot committee, had never ran, you know, a measure before, and she really sort of grounded me in what was next. And so I have so many mentors and political mentors that I look up to that have helped and supported me. One other person, Francisca Porchas, she is the person who helped me build Dignity and Power Now, and she was like my mentor and sort of helping me be an executive director and a strategist around how we built Dignity and Power Now. So many of the early tactics were her idea, and she really supported and mentored me. And we have to talk about, you know, there's a deep sort of like drive to sort of the person who's in the front always gets all the credit, but there's so many people who make this happen. You
know, I say that all the time when I think of Dr. King, but the Big Six.
Yes.
If there was no Big Six, I mean, they were the wind beneath Dr. King.
That's exactly
and
right.
Let's not forget about Dorothy Heights.
Yes.
Who was arguably one of the Big Six. So I applaud you for just acknowledging that, because a lot of times we see you, but there's a strong wind.
There was no way I could be who I am without a brilliant team who's ushered in what we created. All the signature gatherers, those folks who made sure that we got all of our signatures. There's no way we would have a Measure R if there wasn't a team of people, there wasn't organized community.
Do you find or see yourself running for office one day?
You know, lots of people have asked me. I have said no over and over again, but more recently I'm considering what that could look like. So I'm having exploratory conversations with people around what would best fit for office. Does it make sense? Do I really want to run for office? So yeah, that's funny that you asked that.
Yeah, I mean, I can see it. You are, when you talk about Black Girl Magic and the hashtag Black Women Lead, you're definitely that. We want to thank you so much for stopping by. We know
we love the LA Sentinel. Y'all have been amazing to us, seriously.
Yeah, it's an honor to work here. Over 86 years in our community, privilege. But Get Out the Vote is coming out.
Yes.
And this is one of the stops, right?
Yes. We are going to be out all weekend. You can actually go to voteyesonr.org for all the information for all the events. Please show up, stop by. We need people. Put it on your Instagram. If you voted already for our hashtag voted on our, we're on all social media platforms, Reform LA Jails, and Twitter and Instagram and Facebook. Please share. Please vote. We need you.
Yeah, so you guys, you can go knock on some doors, make some phone calls. You can even drop off some coffee, some food, because you guys are going to need it.
Yes.
So we're going to let you get into those streets and do what you need to do. But we want you guys to visit lasentinel.net. If you need help, we have a slate. You don't have to go with everything that we put on the slate, but it's very helpful, especially with the judges, because a lot of times people don't know who to vote for when it comes to the judges. So that's lasentinel.net. I'm Nielle, digital editor for LA Sentinel, and we'll see you next week. We want to thank Patrisse Cullors for joining us today here at the Los Angeles Sentinel newspaper. Don't forget, the last day to vote is March 3rd, but you can vote anytime, anywhere, right now at any voting center. To find the nearest voting center nearest you, visit lasentinel.net. And thanks for sticking with us, your #1 source for Black news, views, and advocacy. It's always at the Los Angeles Sentinel newspaper.